What's good, y'all? It's your boy D-Lou back at it again with another banger video. In this video, I'm going to be reacting to a video that you guys may be surprised to see me do, but if you guys know me, or some of you who may know me, Sonic has been a very influential video game franchise in my childhood. I've always loved the Blue Blur, I love the Blue Hedgehog, and the games that he had. But so seeing that he has the highs like, Sonic Adventure, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Unleashed, even though some people may be like, oh, Unleashed is a bad game, I think it's a good game. You also have those games that may be associated with the dark era. So I'm going over Sonic and the Secret Rings, covered by Chare 5, and then talking about like Sonic and toxic relationships, because relationships is the talk of the town. I like covering them and ultimately going through what they look like for different people in different circumstances and situations, and also applying it in the real world context and kind of letting you guys know a deeper look into my interests and how I viewed Sonic, and even just growing and learning to this. So I'm interested to watch this video with you guys, to react to it and to commentate. And Chare 5, he's been one of my favorite YouTubers ever as far as like Sonic the Hedgehog and just going over games in general. So shout out to you, Chare. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to share this video with a friend so that we may continue to grow into the people that God wants us to be each and every day. As always, it's your boy D-Lou. Let's get it started. Let's get it gang. Sonic Wildfire or Secret Rings. Like, it was Wildfire before if the title was Secret Rings, but let's get into it.
In Sonic and the Secret Rings, the earliest counterpart to Sonic's world you meet is King Shahryar, represented as Dr. Eggman in the world of books. Of the many flaws I consider Secret Rings to suffer from, one of the lesser stated ones is how little it teaches the player about the actual stories contained within the real-life compilation known as the 1001 Nights, more commonly known in the West as the Arabian Nights.
True.
Shahra claims that the king is the creator of the Arabian Nights and is the main character of the story, which is only sort of true. What's failed to be mentioned, and the reason he's represented as Eggman, is because, in a sense, King Shahryar is also the villain of the story. One night, he finds his wife engaged in, for the sake of monetization, let's just say some rather adulterous activities with a numerous group of people. He has her executed and kind of becomes an incel, saying that all women are the same, and orders a new virgin girl to marry him every morning. To avoid them being able to cheat on him like his original wife did, he has them executed each the very next day. That is until one day, a girl by the name of Sherazade, also spelled Shahrazad in Arabic, explaining where Shahra gets her name from, becomes his wife and, to delay her own execution, starts telling the king's stories every night, spanning 1001 of them in total, leaving him on a cliffhanger each night so that he would want to hear more. Now, obviously, that's a really intense story to present to children, which is likely why the original story was omitted, as well as why a character sharing her name with Sherazade, arguably the actual main character of the story, attributes it all to the king instead. Funnily enough, that isn't the story this video is actually about, but I wanted to open with it so that you had the proper context for the story that is the subject of this video.
I never knew that, like, Shahra had, like, or at least, like, the backstory was that in-depth as far as, like, Secret Rings. I honestly thought Shahra was just created for the purpose and, like, the game of Sonic and the Secret Rings. But I like learning about, like, different cultures and, like, their stories and backgrounds, because it just shows you that there is a world out there, and that people have different cultures and like different upbringings and just different stories to tell. And I think that it's interesting that they adapted it into the Sonic verse, because I never would have expected Sonic to cover over like the Arabian Nights, or even when they did Black Knight going over King Arthur, and the Knights of the Round Table. But I think it's really interesting.
The person who summons us to the world of the Arabian Nights is a genie named Shahra, the genie of the ring from the story of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. If you've only ever seen the Disney movie, you might be confused, as there is no Genie of the Ring in that version of the story. In fact, as a kid, I could have sworn that the Genie of the Ring was something entirely made up for Secret Rings. I mean, rings are so synonymous with Sonic, and my only frame of reference was the Disney movie. In the original story, however, it's actually the Genie of the Ring that helps Aladdin escape the dungeon after he finds the magic lamp, a role that was passed on to the flying carpet in the movie. Shahra tells Sonic that her world, the world of the 1001 Nights, is vanishing due to the actions of an evil spirit known as the Eraser Jinn. If all those stories are erased, they're essentially lost forever, and the spirit would be unleashed into Sonic's world, where he could cause even more trouble. Upon entering the book, we start off in the remnants of the lost paragraph, parts of the book Eraser has already gotten rid of. This is also where we meet him for the first time, and he tells us that 100 of the 1001 Nights have already been wiped clean, and hints at something known as the 7 World Rings.
Sorry.
He asks Shara if she's collected them for him yet, implying that these two know each other and have talked.
The reason I started laughing is like, oh, the 100 of the 1000s of the Arabian Nights has been wiped clean. I immediately thought of the Game Grumps, and like they played this one and they got to this part, and then they were just like, they all had healthy doo-doos, and then they were just like, do you need to be wiped clean? And it just made me laugh. Like, Game Grumps, if you guys watch this, you guys are hilarious, and I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for covering Sonic and the Secret Rings. I want you guys to finish it, though. Finish the Sonic and the Secret Rings. I think it'd be interesting to see and to get you guys' reaction.
About this previously. Shara kinda confirms this with her following line, claiming that they don't exist and that even if they did, she would never give them over to him. Something that's kinda easy to miss, which I know I did when I was younger, is that he kind of taunts her here, implying that he knows for a fact that she would indeed give him the rings, to which Shara just kind of dejectedly turns away. He then tells her that in her refusal to do so, a punishment is in order, shooting at her with a flame of judgment, which Sonic swiftly jumps in to protect her from. Over the course of the game, you come to find out that the 7 World Rings are in fact real, and that only someone not of this world can collect them. Upon acquiring the green one, Sonic asks if Shara can remove the flame of judgment he was inflicted with, which is slowly draining his life force. We don't get a straight answer, but it's understood that there isn't anything she can do about it, which is explained earlier before the first boss fight when she says that the Eraser Djin's power is greater than her own. Upon collecting the Blue World Ring, Shara gives Sonic an object of some kind. It's round in shape, but it isn't clear to Sonic, or even the player, what it's supposed to be. Shara describes it as the only thing that will be able to defeat Eraser should all else fail, something that she apparently is unable to use herself. However, we don't really get an explanation of what it is or how it's meant to be used. After the Red World Ring, Sonic isn't exactly sure what to do next, since all the plot threads up to this point have kind of been resolved. Shara suggests that they visit King Solomon, a biblical figure that is mentioned throughout many religious texts and so often features across different stories in the 1001 Nights. She offhandedly remarks that it was he who sealed away the evil spirits long ago, so maybe this all has a connection to him, something that also has basis in the actual 1001 Nights. Each of the world rings contains the power of raw, overwhelming emotions inside it, most of which Sonic is able to describe upon collecting them. The White Ring, for example, contains desire, probably one of the emotions he goes most into detail about, mentioning how it could be ambiguous. It could mean aspiration, but could also be greed and ambition. Shara doesn't say anything, but her reaction when hearing this shows that she knows something we don't. Once we help retrieve the skeletal King Solomon's body, his bones scattered after the Eraser Djinn resurrected the 40 Thieves from Ali Baba's story to come attack him, he reveals that Eraser just so happens to be a genie just like Shara, except he's a far more powerful genie of the lamp. Solomon tells Sonic that the lamp is his weakness, and should they be able to retrieve it, they could lock him away forever. When the lamp is mentioned, Shara is seen visibly upset, something that goes unnoticed by Solomon and Sonic. When collecting the final world ring, Sonic finally asks Shara how it is that she and the Eraser Djinn know each other. A fair question, given that despite being familiar with all of them, no one else in this story really seems to know Shara. That's when she further contextualizes for us that not only is the Eraser Djinn a genie of the lamp, he's the genie of the lamp from the story of Aladdin. Something that Secret Rings does here is combine the stories of King Solomon.
I remember when I first found out about that, I was like, wait, you're telling me that this is the genie from the lamp from Aladdin? And I just used to be like, nah, this is like the genie gone rogue, or like what if the genie turned evil from Aladdin and it's just like he just would have became Eraser Djinn and just be like, yeah, nah, I'm done with the Book of the Arabian Nights and I'm just going on a rampage.
With that of Aladdin. In one of the book's earlier tales, The Story of the Fisherman, King Solomon imprisons a giant evil djinn in a bottle that he then tosses at sea, which is recovered by a fisherman some 400 years later. The genie that appears to the fisherman tells him that rather than be grateful for his release, he plans on killing his liberator, allowing his victim to choose the manner in which they will die. When asked why the genie was doing this, he explains that after 100 years of being sealed away, he had planned to reward whosoever had released him with riches beyond their wildest dreams. When that century had passed, he then planned on rewarding them with all the treasure in the world. After 300 years, he would make whomever released him royalty, granting them 3 wishes every day. This is likely where the contemporary concept of a genie granting 3 wishes comes from. But after 4 centuries of being imprisoned, he grew resentful and vowed death upon whoever released him. Similarly, Shara explains that Eraser had been imprisoned in his lamp due to previous misdeeds and would only be freed after granting the wishes of 1,000 people. And in that time, he had understandably grown resentful of others, victim to the fate of the story he was written into. She acknowledges that Eraser looks down on her. A genie of the ring is lesser than a genie of the lamp. That notwithstanding, she wants to stop him and return the Arabian Nights to their original state. In the lead up to the final battle, Eraser claims that Shara did well in using Sonic to collect the rings and that she should hand them over to him. After everything Shara has done to help us, being the one who brought us here, as well as telling us that stopping him and restoring the Arabian Nights was her dream, it's all the more confusing when she actually does take the rings and delivers them to Eraser. Especially after he tells her that they'll rule the world together, the thing that seems to be Eraser's ultimate goal that Shara was trying to stop. After Sonic expresses his confusion and pleads with her, she reveals that she just wants to be back with Eraser, even saying that she must and that she has no choice. Mind you, none of what she's saying is done so with conviction. This isn't really a moment of Shara being a surprise antagonist, she genuinely looks and sounds remorseful about this. The most telling moment is when Sonic commands her as Master of the Genie of the Ring to do what she truly thinks is right. Shara kind of magically short-circuits. Her heart wants to return to Eraser, but she knows that doing so is wrong. As a Genie of the Ring, she has to obey her master's command, but what she wants is at odds with what she thinks the right thing to do is. Eraser reveals to us what each world ring represents: prayers, sadness, rage, hatred, joy, pleasure, and wishes. Emotions that are no doubt all at the center of the stories contained in the 1001 Nights. However, in order to use the power of the rings, the life of the one who collected them must be offered up as a sacrifice. And before Eraser is able to do that, Shara steps in and shields Sonic from Eraser's attack, the same way he did for her near the beginning of the story. As she's dying, she reveals to Sonic that she knew from the start what would happen and disregarded the consequences. Sonic, meanwhile, seeing the good in her, doesn't blame her for it at all, and pleads with her to grant him the wish of her overcoming her demise. Unfortunately, she's unable to grant that wish, and the vessel that once contained her breaks, representing her death. Something that I just realized while revising the script is that the ring represents more than just Shara's life, though. When she and Sonic first meet, she basically instructs him on how to become her master. Sonic had only just summoned her by picking up the ring, but the contract between the two hadn't been finalized until Sonic put the ring on. The reason that's relevant is because once that contract is sealed, she's bound to protect him. She likely could have brought Sonic into the world of the book just as easily without needing this bond, but in tying herself to him, she ensures that, no matter what happens, she is magically required to keep him safe, even if she ultimately decides to do something that goes against their intended goal. She is well aware that if it came down to it, she would give in to Eraser's demands, and so does something that magically forces her to be able to resist that temptation.
Their hair is also
in complete disregard, Eraser mocks how much less powerful a Genie of the Ring is to him. And this is kind of the crux of the thesis of this video. Shara traveled to an entirely different world just to get Sonic to help her collect something that she knew the Eraser Djinn wanted. She knew what the consequences would be, and even then followed through with fulfilling his wishes that even Shara herself disagrees with, repeatedly describing Eraser as evil. All the while, the Eraser Djinn never doubted for a second that Shara would deliver the rings to him, and even after this display of wavering loyalty, he still doesn't care about her. At the beginning of the story—
Nah, that was messed up when I was a kid. I was just like, okay, so I kind of figured that I was like, these two may have been like romantically involved with each other, because when she said, I just want to be back with them, I took it as just like, no, like, I think they used to be involved with each other. But also too, that Eraser is just kind of a prick, because he just tried to like shoot her off with like the flame of judgment, and then she was like, oh, if it hits Shara, that was my intended goal, but someone else got affected by it, meaning Sonic, he gets hit by it. So now he's taking the punishment that was intended for Shara, and it's gonna drain his life and end his life. And Shara is ultimately like, just like, okay, you know that I'm, or like, you know, you want me to collect these rings. I'm doing it, but I'm doing it to stop Eraser. But when the ending of the game happened, Shara was just like, okay, I must, like, you know, where your heart wants to do it because your heart is longing to be back with someone, but knowing that it's not the right thing to do. And we see that in real world times where it's just like in toxic relationships where two people, they come together, one person is being toxic and the other one, like, they have that just loyalty to them where it's just like, no, like, I want to be back with them, or, you know, I just love them because, you know, they see something in them. But even still, if they were to do something and, like, you know, the other person gets hurt by it, oftentimes the toxic person would just kind of just look at it and just scoff and just be like, oh, well, yada yada yada, and like just kind of discourage it and just be like, they were nothing anyways, and like kind of belittle and like demean someone. But it's an interesting character analysis between like Shara and like the Eraser. But I think it was like well ahead of its time as far as like Sonic and the Secret Rings, because the demographic for this was little kids, so I don't think little kids would like think that much in depth. They may witness it and kind of just be like, huh, okay, the eraser is being a douche, but it's not looked into deep into this, how like as we're adults we can look into it now and have these conversations. But let's continue.
He was ready to curse her with impending death just for stepping out of line, and now that she is dead, having been the one who killed her, he still doesn't show any emotion.
Nope.
Not having sacrificed the Collector of the Rings, Eraser is unable to complete his transformation into Alf Layla wa Layla, the living embodiment of the 1001 Nights.
That thing is
filled with grief over Shara's death, Sonic unknowingly absorbs the rings of sadness, hatred, and rage, transforming him into Darkspine Sonic, who makes...
Okay, so...
Sonic unknowingly absorbs the rings of sadness, hatred, and rage, transforming him into Darkspine Sonic.
Okay, so a few things. So when Eraser turned into Alf Layla wa Layla, I always thought like when he was just like transforming, he was like, oh, like he was screaming or like whatever. I always thought he was singing for a second, and people would just be like, wait, is he opera singing? Like the way his voice actor was like letting that emotion out, it was like he was opera singing. And then Darkspine Sonic, I always had a question. So he has 4 like of the world rings as inhibitor rings. How like Shadow would have like rings right here, and then on his right and left leg. But I know he absorbed like the rings of rage, hatred, and sadness, but where did the 4th ring come from? Was that supposed to symbolize Shara's broken ring, or did they do it just to like add the fullness of just being like, okay, he's like a enraged body of Sonic, but we're going to add the world rings as like inhibitor rings to kind of give the look and familiarity of Shadow. But I don't know. If you guys happen to know why he has 4 rings around his arms and legs, let me know, because this has been bugging me ever since I was a kid. But I've just been going along with it. But let's continue.
Sonic, who makes quick work of defeating Eraser's incomplete transformation. Upon returning to their original forms, Sonic reveals that he's in possession of Eraser's lamp, which was the object Shara gave to him earlier. When she died, the object revealed its true form. Much like Shara being unable to refuse Sonic's wishes, Eraser too is forced to grant the wishes of whosoever possesses his lamp, which, as a genie herself, explains why it was something Shara couldn't use. As Sonic uses Eraser's power to bring Shara back to life and restore the world of the Arabian Nights, he uses his final wish to seal Eraser back in his lamp permanently. As he's getting sucked in, Eraser calls out to Shara, begging her to stop Sonic, telling her that they can start over. And really think about that. This entire time, he hasn't cared in the slightest about Shara or what it is she wants, going as far as trying to kill her when she merely expresses that she won't do what he wants, and showing absolutely no remorse when he does successfully take her life, even unintentionally. All this while being fully aware of how Shara felt, confident that he had her wrapped around his finger. Pun only somewhat intended. But it's only now that he's in danger that he pleads with Shara and tells her that they can start over, swearing that what he's saying is true. Even Sonic in this moment shakes his head, not only knowing that Eraser is lying, but likely also in disbelief that he's still trying to use emotional manipulation to get what he wants. The last thing we ever see the Eraser Djinn do is claim that the world is his, clearly putting forth where his priorities lay. The story of the fisherman ends with him saying that before he tells the genie how he would like to perish, he would like to know if the genie truly came out of the bottle he found. He claims he couldn't believe so, as even the genie's foot was too big to fit in there. Frustrated at the fisherman's skepticism, the genie proves it by willfully returning his body to the bottle, which the fisherman promptly reseals. The genie begs the fisherman to let him out, that he was just joking about the whole "I'm gonna kill you" thing, that if he grants the genie his liberty again, he would be most grateful. The fisherman, however, replies by saying that after his previous display, he would be foolish to set him free a second time. Something that I don't think I properly understood as a kid was the reason Shara cries at the end of the story. I always assumed she was crying over the guilt she felt over everything that had just happened and the role she played in it. Now, through the lens of an abusive relationship where the victim has an emotional attachment to their abuser, it's easier for me to see that she's crying over having to lose the Eraser Djinn. It's why, instead of actively jumping in to try and comfort her and offer words of encouragement the way he normally would, Sonic instead is at a loss for words. As a kid, I found this moment odd. Like, why wasn't Sonic telling Shara that it was okay, that everything was better now, that they won? And it's because, while yes, her wish was granted and she got what she wanted, that also meant losing who she wanted. A bit of an aside, I think the way this game frames how
I like that they portrayed it as that too, because it's just like, okay, she got what she wanted, but but you had to lose who you wanted. Because sometimes in life, and this is just me being maybe a little bit just overly real with you guys, in life, what you want, you can get, but often it can require sacrifice sometimes. Like, you may have to sacrifice people along the way. You may have to sacrifice places. You may have to sacrifice dreams. You may have to sacrifice habits. You may have to sacrifice, what you like, who you may want to experience these things with. But ultimately, if it goes against like what you know is right, you have to ultimately make that choice, and only you can make that decision.
Abuser should be dealt with is quite interesting. Sonic is usually a pretty good judge of character and won't outright dispose of someone if he feels it isn't necessary. He knew Chaos's issue was that his heart was in turmoil and fought to free him from all that. Being a robot, he should have had no problem destroying Metal Sonic, but he recognizes him as an autonomous being, deserving of his own existence. Even in the successor to this game, Sonic and the Black Knight, he knows Merlina's motivation largely had to do with the heartbreak she was suffering from, and treats her with kindness after their final battle. The Bio-Lizard, on the other hand, was engineered to ensure the destruction of Earth. Solaris was about to collapse time altogether. These are non-negotiables. And yes, Solomon did say that the only way to defeat someone as godlike as the Eraser Jin was to seal him away in his lamp, but with the Bio-Lizard and Solaris, it was nothing personal. In fact, it rarely ever is when it comes to Sonic. Seeing how Eraser mistreated Shara, though, willing to become a monster that tried to erase their world and had no qualms with ending her life, consumed Sonic with anger, sadness, and hatred to the point that the world rings that are sealed with those emotions got summoned into him. When taking all that into account, it's pretty clear that sealing him away was the only course of action. The fisherman's last words to the genie are that he plans to build a house on the shore of where he returns the bottle to the sea, so that he can warn all others that, were they to catch a bottle like he did, that they not open it and free such an ungrateful spirit. Sonic doesn't just seal the Eraser Jin away in the lamp, he makes sure that he can't come back by dumping the lamp into the lava at the Evil Foundry. And for the record, I'm not saying that the story's thesis is that abusers should be imprisoned and killed, but that when you have someone like the Eraser Jin, the only thing you can do is force yourself to keep them out of your life, no matter how much that hurts you. He was never going to change, and the cycle would have just continued. If you defeat me, I will simply return again and again. I believe anyone can change, but some people just refuse to. And on the subject of erasing their world, I want to circle back to the importance of Shara's wish, especially as it relates to the topic of this video. Something that I'm only just now putting together is that Shara has a lot of affection for the stories contained in the 1001 Nights, and seems more preoccupied with protecting its stories rather than the world itself. Granted, it is likely because those stories make up her world, but when Sonic is talking about the power he feels from the White Ring of Desire, she explicitly mentions that there are many tales of how power can either corrupt or spark joy contained within the Arabian Nights, and is intimately familiar with its characters and their stories. And I think the reason for it was hinted at the beginning of the game. Shara says that Aladdin and the Magic Lamp is the best story of all the Arabian Nights, or at least the second best. I never paid much mind to it because it's clearly not important in the current conversation, but I have always wondered what story she would consider to be better than the story she herself comes from. And after analyzing the underlying story of this game, as well as considering my limited knowledge of the stories contained in the 1001 Nights, I genuinely believe that the story she may think is the best is the story of Scheherazade and King Shahryar. In fact, I just learned this as I'm writing the script, but in the Japanese manual of the game, Shara makes a direct reference to this story. The story of a powerful man who felt wronged and took his resentment out on a certain group of innocent people, stopped by his latest would-be victim. These stories are how Scheherazade stopped Shahryar's cycle of abuse, stories that speak to the importance of using one's power for good and what can happen when it isn't. Stories that serve as a warning to people like the Eraser Jin and an inspiration to people like Shara. In fact, when we consider what Eraser's already erased, this hits even harder. Like I mentioned before, we first arrived to the world of the Arabian Nights in an area known as the Lost Prologue, and the story of Scheherazade and Shahryar is, in itself, a kind of prologue to introduce all the stories contained in the 1001 Nights. It's no wonder, then, that his next order of business is to take the life of King Shahryar. I always thought the mountain of handkerchiefs Sonic wishes for at the end of the story was kind of awkward. I knew it was a reference to the beginning of the game, now to help Shara get through her grief, but now that I understand her grief more, the wish feels so much more significant. Like I said, there's nothing Sonic or anyone else can do or say to help Shara feel better at this point. But Sonic wishing for this is his way of telling her that he sees her pain, validates it, and that it's okay to grieve even when the person she's grieving is undeserving of it. In fact, seeing Shara's story through this lens also makes her theme, Worth a Chance, an instrumental of which plays during her explanation of who Eraser actually is, the full version of the song playing during the game's final credits, make more sense. It's through and through a love song, one that talks about the sadness of being away from the person you love, having only the memories of your time together to remember them by. And you could argue that it's a song about Sonic going home, but
Sonic
when you have lyrics like, I'm yours alone, even if you're not with me, for you are my why I breathe, it's kinda hard to dispute that the connotations aren't a bit more romantic. It talks about regretting the things that went undid and unsaid, and most tragic of all, it talks about standing alone however long it takes, and that only time will tell if it's meant to be. Despite everything, Shara still loves the Eraser Jin, and hopes that maybe one day their relationship can be a healthy one. At the same time, with lyrics like, but too afraid it all might die, some things they never meant, and didn't know of a way to stay, though I never had felt that way, speaks to knowing that the relationship wasn't good for her. Regardless, the song ends with the lyrics, love is worth a chance, and I've never thought much of this song, but given this new context behind it, I have a knot in my throat. I've seen and have experienced firsthand what it's like to be stuck in your own emotions, yearning for someone that doesn't care about you the way you wish they would, the way you do for them. The worst part is knowing that it's a cycle you should break from, holding out hope that things can change. Everyone can see that it won't, and deep down, you're afraid that they're right. But the way they make you feel is unlike anything you've ever felt for anyone else. What's worse about it in Shara's case is that it seems like until Sonic came around...
Okay, so I want to touch on that last little segment that he said where it's just like coming from a place of where you may feel something for someone and they don't feel the same way for you. Everyone else is just like, okay, it's best if you just like move on. I felt that. I felt it. I've understand it and I've been through it. But ultimately, it may be tough in the beginning to like let it go. And it is going to be tough. There's going to be nights to where you're just like, why didn't it work out? Or like, maybe they can change, or just like running from the truth from it. But ultimately knowing that sometimes people may not want to change. And that's the part that sucks about it. But you just got to separate yourself from that person or that thing, ultimately to become a better person of you, because you don't know who else is going to come into your life. Who else is going to impact it for the better? And sometimes you just need people to get you out of that funk and to just open and broaden your perspectives.
She was relegated to this fate. She talks about Eraser's destiny being a sad one, tied to the story he was written into. The whole reason he wanted to erase and take control of the Arabian Nights, to break free from the cycle that was forced upon him. And after she saves Sonic's life before the final battle, Shara asks if she managed to change her own destiny. In the end, she does break her own cycle and does what she truly thinks is the right thing to do, even if it breaks her heart. That's why the book changes from Aladdin and the Magic Lamp to Sonic and the Secret Rings.
Didn't know that.
The story changes. Just like Scheherazade, Shara breaks the cycle. I've always liked the story of Secret Rings, even though it always felt like there was an element of the story that was missing. Like I said, it doesn't really dive into contextualizing the real-life tale of the 1001 Nights, or even any of the stories contained within it. But I think I understand now that that was never really the point, because the Arabian Nights is just the setting the story of Secret Rings takes place in. Understanding Secret Rings as the story of Shara and the Eraser Jin definitely helps the story feel a lot more complete. And it makes sense. This is a subject I want to save for a future video, but I've noticed that Sonic is never really the protagonist of the stories he's in. He's usually just the vehicle that drives the plot for other characters' stories, and Secret Rings is a perfect example of that. In the background, we always see what it is Shara thinks or how she's feeling. And even at the end of the game, she's the one narrating and wrapping up the story, being the last character we actually see. Because really, this story is about her. Next time you play Secret Rings, go into it with this perspective in mind and see if that changes how the story makes you feel. I'd love to know what you think. Until next time though, stay safe and stay awesome, everyone.
Alright, shout out to the boy Chari. Appreciate this video. This makes me have a different outlook on Sonic and the Secret Rings, where I never looked at it from this perspective of like viewing Shara and like the relationship that she was in, but also how Sonic viewed it, like the comparisons between how he analyzed that chaos. He was just filled with misery, and then Metal Sonic, he was an autonomous being, and like that's why he often lets him go. But it's the choice of free will, and like if people want to change and can change, he will let them go. Or even Merlina in Sonic and the Secret Ring, or Sonic and the Black Knight. BioLizard, that he was programmed to destroy humanity and destroy the world, and Solaris was about to collapse time and space. But with the secret rings, he recognized that Razor Jin was just emotionally manipulating Shara, and when he was in danger, he was put in the hot seat and was just like, no, like, the fact that you went back to him was just like, Shara, like, stop him. We can rule the world together, the two of us. And that's why he was just disappointed. Not only like seeing in his last ditch effort to get back at Shara and to be like, oh, like, I can manipulate her in this point because I'm in danger and it's going to erase my plans or like jeopardize what I have going. But this was a really interesting video and like I thoroughly enjoyed it. And let me know what you guys think. Like, what did you guys think about the index for finding out more about like the 1001 Nights and all that, Arabian Nights, and then also like the connotation that like these stories with Sonic the Hedgehog is never meant mostly about him, but to drive other characters and their stories and their plot lines going. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to share this video with a friend so that we may continue to grow into the people that God wants us to be each and every day. As always, it's your boy D-Lu signing out. I love y'all. Peace.